Welcome to Authentic Space Podcast with Kasha and Co, who live their lives unapologetically.
So does it ever surprise you or hit you or something like that when like something happens in your life? Like I recently had, some sort of argument with a member of my family, and all of a sudden you just see kind of like a pattern that you have already like experienced in the past, and then all of a sudden you kind of recognize the pattern, and then you just disengage and you're like,
Yeah.
I'm not getting into that thing again. And so you just like all of a sudden step back, and it's like you're like clicking a switch.
So
It's
almost like an off switch, right?
Yeah, it's like it's crazy because it's just, as I was saying, like this just happened to me. And I realized and recognized that it was the behavior of the other person. It was very similar to the behavior of another person in my past, over which I spent so much time thinking and thinking and thinking and being like,
And analyzing and
yeah,
figuring out what happened. And
and like
yeah,
super
it's
emotionally linked to it to a certain extent. And then all of a sudden, like this time, I just recognized it and I'm like, whoa, 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 wait a second. Just click the button off and that's it.
I mean, it's a perfect example of repeating patterns, right? So things that we grew up with, or things that are triggering us or traumatizing us, and we have these people in our life that come into our life or on our path, like we always say, for a season, a reason, or a lifetime.
Yeah.
And it just these situations happen, and experiences occur, and conversations or conflicts, agreements, disagreements. It's usually through communication, because that's I think that's a challenge for the entire humanity, right? Good communication. And then we end up in a situation where we're like, wow, it's the same pattern that keeps on coming up and coming up, right?
And I do think that it does teach you a lesson. Like in this case, I learned that I become like I am in control of that switch and I can distance myself. Because at a certain point, you come to like a door, right? And you're like,
Hmm.
okay, do I keep on explaining myself, and do I keep on trying, or do I get to a point where I understand and say like, I understand that this is as far as I can go with the energy that I have, because it's a waste of energy for me to try more and more and more.
Yeah, especially when there is no solution to a certain situation, right? Like sometimes a
Yeah.
situation just needs to be left alone. Sometimes it's just a matter of just moving on, right? And it's interesting how we have these situations that happen, and these patterns that keep on occurring. And a lot of the times we're like, I will never let this happen to me again, or
Mm.
I understand exactly what happened, so I'm not gonna repeat it again, right? But sometimes it does, and it does, once again, and it does 5 times. I do want to say though, sometimes it takes us several times to really truly cut away from it, or
Yeah.
say, or actually put a stop to it, right? And
I mean, just recognizing it in the first place, and then you get to the point where you're able to stop it. But it does take time, as you say.
because it is a process, right? So sometimes I mean, there are people that they see a pattern automatically on the spot, and they're like, okay, I don't want to go through this again. I
Yeah.
need to evolve from the situation. This was not healthy for me. This was distracting or taking away from my energy and my focus. But sometimes it's harder when it's involving our family members, or people that are close to
Yeah.
us, or people that we love. And sometimes we go through it again and again, and we start recognizing, we start seeing, but maybe we just don't know how to go through it. And maybe there's other things that kind of play out,
Yeah.
as we evolve through it, we process through it. And then maybe when you do need several times to really truly put an end to it, right, and evolve from it.
Yeah. I mean, yes, but also, as you rightly mentioned, with having dealing or finding these patterns with people that we love or that we have a very deep relationship with, like family members in my case,
Hmm.
it's, I think there is a push internally to try to make it work, and even
Resolve
to
it.
just like, yeah, and like force it to work. While we were just talking about this in one of the previous episodes, how sometimes just because you are family with someone and you share blood, it doesn't mean that you need to definitely share a very deep connection or a very deep relationship, right? But
Hmm.
when stuff like this happens, especially with people that you love, and now I'm again referring to family because this is my just recent experience with this, it's almost like there is like something in your brain that tells you, oh, this is family, things need to be peaceful. You cannot be like mad at family, you know, it needs to be working fine all the time, and we all need to be happy and this and that. But we also have to think that besides being family and sharing blood or relation, etc., we are human beings first, which means
Yeah.
that we're all different. We all think in a different way. We all come from different experiences. We all go through different traumas that have an impact on us that is different for everyone, which also means that when we are in a discussion, a heated discussion or a conversation, we also bring different things to the table. And sometimes it's very hard to understand where a person comes from when they're having some sort of discussion, or in this case for me it was a heated discussion, a kind of a fight, you know. And at a certain point you come to a moment where you understand that this person does not want to understand what you're trying to say. They're not interested in resolving this because they think they're right. They're stuck in their position. They're not willing to see the other part's view, or to try to understand or to do it better, or I don't know. And I think that's the crack, right? That's the moment where you see that pattern, and then you
Well,
put up a boundary,
at
right?
least in your situation, the
Yeah.
situation that you were faced with, because I do want to say, just as you said, every person has their own journey or experiences that they go through, and different patterns that evolve. It's also the same that every person is coming into this life with different tools or equipments, right? So
Yes. Yeah.
maybe this particular example that you're mentioning, maybe this person is not equipped with an understanding or being open-minded or trying to find a solution, right?
Oh,
To
most definitely not. Most definitely not. And this is the, I think that this is the problem. I think that we go back to another very big pillar of our conversations, which is we all come from a different developmental stage when it comes to, you know, how we behave and how we face life. And I do think that, you know, when I was talking about sometimes you don't want certain people in your life because they do not match the emotional depth that you have. Because for me it's like, I mean, literally for me it's like I don't have time to waste with people that are not capable of reaching a certain type of depth, because it's just there's no time. Life is too short. I can't be spending my life explaining things that someone will not understand, or you know, you gotta come meet me at a certain common point, because otherwise there's just no sense. It doesn't make any sense. I think it becomes a bit harder when you realize that it's almost like there's some sort of disappointment. It's like you had an expectation of someone that you're having a conversation with that kind of is not maybe at your same emotional level, but has been able to understand your train of thoughts and things like that. But then you come to a point where you're just disappointed because this stuff happens and you're like, oh my God, like,
yeah,
holy shit.
every time we have an expectation, there is a huge possibility for a disappointment to happen, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're, maybe not in a healthy relationship where communication is healthy and it's present at all times,
Yeah.
but usually in relationships where it's just there's not that alignment, right? And
Yeah.
we are human beings, we are social species, we do attach emotionally. I feel like we need to start kind of to learn to, if we are kind of attaching to someone, right, that the other person is emotionally mature and emotionally
Yeah.
intelligent and open to a communication.
Yeah, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. I mean, and I think that the older we get, and the older I get, the more I become jealous of my time, as I said many times in many other episodes. And I just do not have the time to waste on people that cannot meet me at that level, or they cannot have the same type of direction to a certain extent. And I'm not saying we have to be all the same, but we all try to bring something to the table for each other. And for me in this case, it was, well, actually, when we were talking about it, you said something that for me was very much resonating, because you are in the process of, you recognize this pattern, and so you kind of like put up a boundary, meaning that you don't really, you decide not to engage,
Yeah.
because
Or
there's no
you
point in
distance
engaging.
yourself from it. Yeah.
And that's exactly what you said. You distance yourself, which the distance is literally a way to, it's something that helps you manage a situation like this, where you're having a heated discussion and you have a very deep disagreement with someone that you share, for example, like a family connection with, or whatever, where it's like, I cannot, and I'm not going to eliminate this person from my life, but that distance allows me to manage the relationship in a way that doesn't hurt me and doesn't kind of like waste my energy.
Or interferes with what your goals, what you're about, your energy, your focus.
Exactly.
And especially when we're dealing, it's usually when we're dealing with, again, people that we're not necessarily aligned with on an energetic level. It's more of a tight,
Yeah.
because of family kind of connection. And you know distancing ourselves from those situations or kind of relationships that are not the healthiest for us. I feel like it's
Hmm.
one of the most amazing things that we can do for ourselves. And
Absolutely.
sometimes it's even during an argument, right? Like, let's say if there's a conflict, an argument, when you see certain people, you just know there's never going to be a resolution or a solution to a
No.
conversation. And so sometimes even just stepping away and going for a walk, just kind of disappearing for
Yeah.
a little bit, gaining that distance, right, whatever it is, helps a great deal, right, to even
Yeah.
kind of calm the two people down, right? Sometimes it could
Yes.
mean, if it's like a more of a stressful situation, it's maybe not necessarily just like an argument in the moment, but it's just a stressful situation that whether someone lives in, or it's just a more of a prolonged anxiety level and kind of
Yeah.
stressors and triggers and patterns. Sometimes things like moving away, or really maybe going on vacation, right? It just kind of having that distance for a longer period of time is an amazing thing, right? So again, it's
Yeah.
not to say that it has to be a permanent thing. I think, for me, I've kind of dealt through a lot of situations like that, where for me, just relocating, starting my life from scratch was the best thing ever. And then all of a sudden, when I kind of, started a life on my own,
Hmm.
it almost naturally just kind of resolved the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, because with certain people, we'll just never, if we decide to keep them in our life, with certain people, it's just the resolution is never going to be there. But that
No.
distance is allowing to, like you said, maintain the relationship and cordial relations with a particular person.
And I think that's a very important thing to say, because, it's like when you grow up and they always tell you, like, oh, we're going to be friends forever, right?
Hmm.
It's just a bit unrealistic, because, you never know what happens in life. Things change. There are moments in life when relationships change because of things like this that happened to me happen, or you may need, as you say, a complete start from scratch, a complete like
Mhm.
deletion of someone from your life, because obviously they are toxic, or really just it doesn't work. It
Yeah.
doesn't work anymore. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's hurting both parties. So it's just the time and the moment to like break up, let's say. But
Yeah.
then you are in other situations, like the family, for example, where you're not exactly ready or willing to break a relationship and just like completely and utterly, and it's not a final decision.
Yeah, sometimes if it's people that just kind of walk into your life just temporarily,
Yeah,
it's easy to say, you know what, that doesn't work for me, and we can just change my number, or we just
yeah,
kind of detach from each other, and everyone kind of goes their own separate way
yeah,
or ways. But sometimes, if it is, at least for me with my upbringing, right? Like, I was born in a quite traditional family where family is everything. And I'm also a very individualistic person. So for me to kind of being able to balance the two, and by individualistic, I mean, I've always been kind of the black sheep, different, out of the box. So
yeah,
for me, there's a lot of I don't want to say conflicts, but there's a lot of relationships with my family where it's just the solution is never going to be there. It's just the alignment of where we are, what we want out of life is not going to align. I'm not saying never. We never know. We all evolve, and we all have our processes,
yeah.
but it hasn't happened for so many years yet. So it's just obviously I have no expectation for that.
But it's also, sorry, you're saying something very important here that regards like, even it's a matter sometimes of, we're talking about non-alignment, but it's a matter of, I don't know if you experience this, but you probably have, because I have, a matter of how even like family members or people perceive you as a person.
Hmm.
And then how like sometimes, they will just recognize you in a certain way,
They'll put a
but
label on you.
yes, but so much time has passed and you are now a different person. So you are a different person, and in front of you they have a person that they don't recognize anymore, and that just kind of is where the disconnect is. And
Hmm.
then they have a certain expectation, again expectation,
Yeah.
they have a certain expectation of behavior, but then all of a sudden, yet like here it's me, 10 years later, and there are things that I have explored that, for example, give me a lot of pleasure, and they make me very happy that they didn't used to. Or there are a lot of things that trigger me because I don't know, whatever, I don't have a reason. And the other side doesn't understand that it's been like 10 years, it's been 15 years, whatever. I am a different person today. You cannot, relate to me the same way you used to 15 years ago. I'm a completely different person. And so I'm having different reactions to different things. So this is another dimension as well, I think.
For sure. And then I do want to say that a lot of this is, a lot of this stuff kind of happens on a traditional family or sometimes religious backgrounds and families where
Yeah.
everyone just kind of is born. This is what you're meant to do. This is, you're supposed to get married by this age. Then you're supposed to have this many children. You're supposed to live nearby your parents. Then you're supposed to take care of it.
Hmm.
Like it's almost your whole life is set out for you. And
Yeah.
it is a clan, it's some sort of a tribe that you belong to. The moment you
Hmm.
step out of that tribe, that's where it's almost like you're a little bit of a catalyst to that tribe. And
Yeah.
it's I feel like it's natural for them to start kind of labeling you because they don't understand anything outside of their box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
That's so true.
I mean, this is the perfect example of me when I was a teenager. Because usually, I always say, up until 7 years old, we all develop and our brains develop. We don't understand or have an understanding yet, or we're not able to speak to the levels of I'm not okay with you not
Mm.
having the emotional capacity
Mm-mm.
towards me when I'm 5, right? Like a
Yeah.
7, up until 7, we're not going to be able to have these conversations. And then, usually teenagers, you have teenagers that are, good students. They pretty much go with the system. They tell you what to do. They love their parents. They have great relationships. Then you have the rebels, right, of the world, which that
Yes.
would be me. Ever since I
Yeah.
I turned teenage years, 12 years old, the rebel came on, because I was really questioning everything that was in the system. And my label was always a rebel. Why is it that you're always so different? Why do you have to be so difficult?
Yeah.
It's because
Yeah.
the tribe does not want to evolve or move forward, and I do. My soul
Yeah.
just is hungry for that. So obviously, the moment I was able to, I stepped out of it and I went into the world to experience it. So now I'm becoming even more and more of, who are you? We don't know who you are, even though they try to still put the same label on me, as if I was the 12-year-old child, right?
And notice how every time something like this, like every time you become a different person and people don't recognize you, all of a sudden you become the difficult person,
Always,
right?
yes. And
Oh, why
then
do you have to be so difficult?
and why do
You
you have
know,
to be
like,
so sensitive? And why do you have to,
right.
yes,
And my answer is, why do I have to be so difficult? Why do I have to be so sensitive? Because I have boundaries and you just walked or tried to walk all over them. So I am protecting myself.
tribes don't really like boundaries. They never
Yeah.
respect them, and as a result, usually people like that don't respect you as a person. You have to do what they pretty much tell you. There's got to be. I always find that it's almost like they don't look at you as another person, another human with a mind, a curious
No,
mind, an evolution, opinions, thoughts, emotions. But it's always, if I'm older, you have to respect me. There's no reverse.
what do you know? You're young, you have no experience, and it's just, for me, this was one of the things that was discussed during this fight. The time, the age difference. Like, it's just, which is ridiculous.
Age difference I see a lot, in families where they would be like, well, you're so young, you should be this and that. But when you think about it,
Mhm.
I'm like, well, your son or your daughter is 45. Just because you're always older, that
Exactly.
doesn't mean that your child is still 5 years old. So even by saying that, well, you're so young, you should be, doesn't matter if, again, your child could be an adult, could be, 30, 40, 50, even 18. It shows that the parent saying that still looks at that child of theirs, and they still think, oh, you're
As
still two
a
years old.
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is just, yeah, it's, yeah, creates a disconnect.
It does create a disconnect, and that's why, talking about the distance, right? And how sometimes it's just kind of building, deciding what kind of a relationship am I allowing to have with this person, or what kind of a relationship I want to have with this person. And,
Yeah.
based on that, based on what is our choice, deciding and kind of determining, sometimes it means a distance. Sometimes it means just, living really far away. Sometimes it's just
Yeah.
maybe I'm able to handle, having a dinner with you once a week, or maybe just having a phone call once a week, or maybe just on
Yeah.
Christmas. And all of that is okay. I think it comes down to, we come first always.
Yeah,
We
for
always have
sure.
to tender to what we need, and what our energy needs, and what it requires, and what feeds us, not what takes away from us. And based on that, kind of deciding how much of it I'm willing to give to which person.
Stay tuned for more and join our community at AuthenticSpacePodcast.com and on Instagram at AuthenticSpacePodcast.